Hello, everyone, and welcome back. Today, I am joined by Jerica Shackelford, and we are going to continue our conversation. And we're going to talk about leadership. We're going to talk about its application and how we can better promote the profession and the professional. Jerica, thank you for taking the time to talk to me about this.
Yeah, of course. I'm really excited about it.
Before we started recording, when we were catching up, you had made some basically some comments and statements that I found extremely valuable, and I wanted to make sure that we brought that to our participants and to those who are listening and viewing, and really shine light on too on what you're doing as a leader in the field. And so, just to retouch on that, you mentioned the shift or the pivot in being a specialized area of emergency management to a more encompassing area, and where you can better promote and support the practitioner. And that's what I'm doing here, and that's my vision, is that I can promote and coordinate support for the practitioner, for the professional who's out there, and give them that support. So what is it that in your purview made you make that decision?
Yeah, I think, I had been at my agency. August will make my 12th year at HCMA. And I started in grants. I've had various EOC roles, including EOC manager. And I think with my background in grants, I always was interested in how the money kind of speaks to what the priorities are. What they say, you see where you spend your money, you see what your priorities are. And that's real, I think, in every profession, but it's specifically important in emergency management when so much of what we do is a grant funded, or there's specialized funding that funds how we are able to kind of move forward with certain initiatives. And I became really interested in kind of the process, the policies, the procedure, the work culture, all of those things that support the operations part of it. Up until 2020, we had a lot of things that we're typically activated for. I mean, DC is a First Amendment city. You can probably name an event every day that's happening in the district, not always rising to the level of an EOC back activation or having to have full teams on board. But there was a lot of downtime to think about how we were, putting things in place to make it so that we could make more data informed decisions, how we could give staff like repeatable processes so that they didn't feel like they were floundering just because the scenario changed a little bit. There were ways with an agency of our size, which is huge compared to other emergency management shops. So I recognize that, but not a big agency when you compare it to other district agencies. How do we provide opportunities for growth for people when we might not be able to promote them every year to a new position? Because a lot of people are at our agency, they come and they stay for a good long time. So I was just interested in finding ways to keep people engaged, to keep kind of a culture of innovation of EM. We are very non-traditional, I think, compared to a lot of EM shops. We do ICS, we talk in ESF, we can do all of that. But what we learned for our city leadership and a lot of our partners is that, ICS doesn't work. That doesn't translate to our leadership. We have to tell the story, the narrative, the so what. And so we've changed things and developed things so that if you came in and you're an ICS purist, as we call it, we have an equivalent form. We have an equivalent of a 201. But that's not the way that we do things. And while it probably makes other folks uncomfortable, I wanted to foster an environment where we felt okay with doing what works for the district. We're kind of a state, we're kind of a city, we're kind of a Fed just because our proximity to the federal government. And so I think, what really inspired me for that was there was an opportunity and an appetite for people to change. And I think that, beyond my operational role, kind of having those different seats let me see the big picture. And I really wanted to be able to put some like strategy and structure around an intentional decision to keep growing in that way.
Well, and that's amazing insight as well. But the thing I want to really touch on here is the desire to build up the professional.
Yeah.
And leadership is one of the things that I'm really trying to promote in what we do, is that it's on the each individual practitioner's shoulders, really, to step into a leadership role to develop influence and trust and engagement with the community or the organization in which they reside. So they, maybe work at a large level like you, or a lower level where they are maybe a department of one. But in practicing emergency management leadership, it's a, and if people say soft skills, I think it's a very artful skill, and it's a word I'm trying to use a lot more when it comes to leadership, is application as art. Um, but there's an aspect there of that we need to change the way we do things in our approach, and a lot of that is marketing and how we market ourselves and how we engage with people and communicate. It happens through the active application of leadership. And so what are your, as far as you move forward, and you work in a very big organization, but you're also talking that you've spoken at a couple conferences and you're a mentor, which is amazing. How is it that you're applying your leadership in the way that you invest in them?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, the biggest part, that I maybe wish that I had when I was earlier in my career. And I joke with one of my colleagues. He tells me all the time, Jerica, these kids are going to change the world. And I say, well, it's because we're going to let them. I think that there are a lot of people that are, early or mid in their career of emergency management specifically, where, if you didn't have a relationship with a certain person, or you didn't have a certain set of experience, you maybe weren't really trusted to try something new or to bring forward a new idea, or if it was something that was not within the ICS or command structure or whatever, it wouldn't be entertained. For me, I like to say, I know that I'm a good leader when people think that folks that work with me and for me are doing an amazing job. The best compliment to my leadership is the extensions of me, really going out and impressing other people with the work they're doing and the contributions that we're making. And the only way to do that is to understand that you don't have to be the decision maker all the time. I think of myself almost as a guidance counselor of like, go, figure it out. If you have an idea, there's no idea that I won't hear. Like, tell me what you're thinking, tell me the idea that you have. I might come back to you and say, well, it might not work because of this, or, well, did you think about this, or did you ask this person? But my goal is to never diminish somebody trying to come up with a new idea. And I think that's led us to some really great projects and programs and initiatives. I think it's really helped us evolve. I think it's helped us to attract talent. I say, our internship at this point is our number one sort of source for recruiting new staff. And that's because we give our interns access to really get their feet wet into projects, into the work that we're doing. And we have managers and teams that are really supportive of that. I've seen so many posts on social media about I can't get an EM job because I don't have the experience for the EM job, but I can't, unless I volunteer. That's really a struggle. I think when our interns walk out, they can say, I helped update the agency's COOP program, or, whatever it is that they're interested in. And for us, moving to that kind of format is critical because people are getting burned out from EM. People are turning over, they're finding careers that let them work telework 100% of the time, which our office isn't doing. And so we really have to find other ways and incentives to grow people, through conferences, through trainings, through speaking engagements, through opportunities, through leading projects, and not letting their tenure or even their lack of experience be a reason that their voice is not heard at the table. And what I've found is that giving that grace, kind of like relinquishing the reins in that way. I think people's fear is that like people are just going to go crazy. They're just going to start doing all these things and making decisions, and then you've got to clean up. What I've actually found is that when you do that, people are more inclined to come to you, and get your feedback and get your guidance, and make sure that they're on the right track because you've trusted them with something, that they really care about doing well. And so I think it's kind of like something that you don't really consider, that giving more freedom actually gives you more. I don't want to say control is not control, but giving people more freedom actually keeps you more engaged, because they want to work with you to get to that end goal. And I think that we have really been trying hard, at least I have been really trying hard to be a model of that. Um, And I think about the number of people that stop by my office any given day. It's working. But I think we have to do that. We have to encourage people who aren't your traditional emergency managers to feel comfortable doing that. I'm a communication major. I get asked all the time how I ended up doing EM and doing super operational work. And so much of it is just communication. It's talking through people through, what the plan is, coming to consensus on a plan, figuring out how you're going to implement it. And as we're seeing threats change, folks who are city planners and environmentalists and health backgrounds, especially after we had all of this stuff with COVID and monkeypox and all of this that's happening, school teachers, like the whole gambit of people are great for the profession. We just have to do better at showing them that there's a place for their skill set, and giving them the freedom to kind of show us what they're bringing to the profession and how it'll make us better.
Yeah, I think, I mean, one of the key points that, just to touch on is the empowerment of others. You're empowering them to really step in and touch on another thing that you mentioned, which is innovation. And innovation is not necessarily one of the areas in emergency management that is the most embraced. So it's one of those areas where the more we can accept that change is happening and growth needs to happen, and the innovation has to happen, that we embrace that and we empower others to run with those ideas or those projects, can definitely not only promote them as an individual, but promote the profession overall. In your practice or in your experience, in communication, because communication is huge and it's a big part of leadership as well, but it's a huge part of emergency management, and it's one that I don't think is actively applied enough when
Yeah.
it comes to engaging and actively engaging in communication and making the attempts to engage in a community or your organization or your leadership. And I say that mainly being that most EMs are not in a position of authority, so they have to learn to lead and influence their leadership, and that happens through communication and be able to communicate who you are, why you're important, why their involvement is important, and how it benefits them. And that's a huge part. So how, in your experience with communication, can we better build the professional to engage in that communication?
So you took some of the words right out of my mouth. The majority of my time at the agency, I haven't been in a leadership position. I've been in positions where I had to collaborate and work in teams and convince people that what I thought we needed to do, especially when it came to the emergency operations side of the house, when I was still in grants, like, why should I listen to you, grants person? What do you just, give us the money and leave us alone? I had to work from leading with my peers and figuring out a sphere of influence and building relationships and all of that stuff to get the things done, that I thought or that others thought if we were doing it as a team needed to be done. I think one of the best ways to do that is to, as leaders, is to make sure that we're not so caught up on what lane something is in. If we can invite more people to the conversation to give a new perspective, it doesn't hurt us. It widens, our kind of view, our field of vision of what we're looking at. One of my favorite things is to get a new employee and like someone new to say, "Hey, why do you guys do this way?" Sometimes it's just the way that you have to do things because your procurement rules say so, and until that law changes, or FEMA requires us to do something in a specific way. But I think instead of saying, "Hey, this new guy, this new girl, she doesn't know what she's talking about," giving them some of the things that we've been struggling with, knowing that we wanted to change, but maybe didn't know how. I think that's the prime time to introduce it and give somebody ownership of something, because they're going to have a perspective that you don't have. They're coming from either another agency, maybe they're new to emergency management for the first time, and just their, inquisitiveness about it, their perspectives from wherever they came from can really serve to make us better. And I think it goes to what I was saying earlier, is that there's a space for everybody in EM. Like I literally believe that, because we're solving such complex problems that touch every bit of thing. And as people learn more of what EM is, we're getting thrown more problems to solve. And I think if we can take that approach with, the trust that's been given to us as leaders to solve problems, we need to transfer that trust to people that work with us to help us solve problems as well.
Yeah, and on that note, we are seeing that there are more problems or issues or projects that people are recommending get moved under the emergency management scope of work. Where are you on that, and how do you think that will really impact the future of where emergency management goes? I mean, one of the most recent is whether the homelessness should be the homelessness, working with the population and working through the projects would be an emergency management function. Where are you on potentially having that underneath emergency management? Do you think it would hinder or help our costs?
It's tough because there's one thing to be given new problems. There's one thing to be given new problems with more resources. So if we don't get the resources, I think that we do have to be mindful of the new things that we take on, because it can, turn our attention away from the things that are traditionally in our wheelhouse. However, at the same time, I think especially when you talk about homelessness, that conversation about homelessness has an overlap to me with conversations that we talk about with equity. People don't just turn up homeless out of nowhere. There's a lot of life circumstances and things that happen, that people who experience homelessness end up in that position, whether it's, mental health, they have, they served the country and they didn't have the resources they needed when they got back. They didn't have resources to jobs or education or services. The whole, you have to have a phone number and a clean suit to get a job interview. But if you don't have a place to stay, then it's hard to do those things. I think as we think about equity, especially in emergency management, having ownerships of programs or problems like homelessness only gives us more insight to how we could and should be responding or planning for different events and populations, and the things that might not be second nature to a lot of practitioners because they're not having that experience. I would just say the slippery slope with that is making sure that we're properly resourced. And maybe that doesn't mean more people in our shop. Maybe that's a dedicated effort between us and a human services or another, public facing entity to get the support and maybe, have more of a collaboration there. But quite honestly, I think the complexities of the problems that we have to solve, we're solving emergencies. We're dealing with emergencies for the benefit of the public. So the more that we know and learn about the public, the more that the public understands what we do, I think the better the practice gets out of it. It's just another learning opportunity, but again, resources, because there's only so many hours in the day, so many people that you can put towards different problems.
No, 100%. And that leads me to one more question before we wrap it up is the need for more resources. And I've been saying that COVID, brought with it an opportunity for emergency managers to really step into the spotlight and to really start leading, but more than that, to start advocating for the resources that they need. And how, in your opinion, ultimately, or some of your maybe even real life experience that you've had, how have you used COVID or any other situation that you've experienced to really be able to advocate for the resources that you need?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely been a tool for us in the district. You can't deny how much work our agency has done in response to, especially these concurrent events that we've had over the last couple of years. And not just our agency, as I said, we have our big six and our big eight that we do emergency management work. They have their own emergency management shops within their agencies that we work really closely with. And so we've been advocating for resources across the district to support our operations. And as I've stated, we've had more things that people have come to us and said, hey, you guys manage this so well, can you manage this too? And we say yes, but, or yes, and, we need these additional resources to support us. Even if it's a short-term project, then we need contractors or we need some sort of offload with us. And I'm sure a lot of agencies can understand this. With being grant funded, there are certain activities that we can't do with our typical grant funds with our staff. So we need to be augmented by local funding or some sort of other funding to peel people off to work on those initiatives. So we've definitely been thinking about that. And we've also been planning for, as we continue to grow in certain areas, how many more people are we going to need in the next 18 months, 36 months, on out to support our operations and support that growth. And the last thing I'll say is that we've been working slowly but surely on an initiative. And I know some states and localities have this already, but it's something that we're building is more of a disaster workforce. We don't need emergency managers for everything. We might need an emergency manager to lead a team, but sometimes we just need extra people to run that shelter site, that pod site, that testing center. And we want to be able to more easily tap into the district workforce to help us do that and be able to do kind of quick just-in-time training. So we've been working on that a lot. And I think, so we want to be able to surge up our staffing with using district resources, some of the staff at other agencies who don't do traditional emergency management. That way we can reserve our staff, our emergency management staff, or our emergency management staff at other agencies to be those team leads, to do that just-in-time training, to be shift leads, so that as we're doing the mission, we make sure that we've got that coverage and we've got that perspective of the emergency manager. But we really just need, as I spoke to, I think on our first session, those strong coordinating humans that we can kind of drop in, solve a problem for a couple of days, run a center for a couple of days, to be able to sustain us. We can't have an endless amount of emergency management staff, even though I'm sure we'd all love to. But if we can find the right balance of getting staff in the way that we need to scale up, and then being able to leverage other opportunities, in some jurisdictions that might be more of their volunteer staff, that might be more of their workforce that they already have sort of disaster workforce model that they can use. But be flexible in figuring out how we're going to solve emergency management problems. Sometimes it's contractors, sometimes it's volunteers, sometimes it's students, but I think part of that being nimble and being flexible is being open to all of those opportunities and possibilities, and figuring out what's going to be best for the response and the mission that we're doing.
Well, that is awesome, and just wanted to take the time, even though we've had some technical issues, we worked through them, and I truly appreciate you taking the time to be with me today. I tell everybody that your time is the most valuable resource you have, and
Yes.
After hearing your calendar and your week, it is absolutely true. And I appreciate you giving me just a little bit of it today, and I appreciate you sharing your thoughts, your insights, and your experience with those who are listening and watching this today. And I just want to give you a quick minute to just tell people where they can find you, and if you have any last words for our audience.
Yeah, I would just say you can definitely find me on LinkedIn. My name there is Jerica Shackelford. Our agency is also pretty active with our LinkedIn page there, which is DC Homeland Security and Emergency Management. I'm recently trying to get re-engaged in Twitter, so there I'm Jerica_lately. And like I said, I'm happy to share my contact information for you to put in the show notes if anyone wants to reach out. And the last thing I would say is just I'm very grateful. I've been saying a lot lately that emergency management is a field of passion. I don't know anybody who does emergency management that doesn't have a very personal why or a drive for it. And I know that we're maybe starting to get some of the credit and the attention that we deserve, but I just want to thank everyone that is tuning in, that's listening, that cares enough to make the work that we do better, that's invested in making the profession better, to socializing it, to getting more people engaged in it. I'm very excited to see kind of what the next generation of emergency management looks like. And I think a lot of folks, especially, people who are hosting podcasts and all of that stuff like you are, Daniel, are really contributing to the future. And I think it's important that we just keep these discussions going.
Well, thank you for that. And, ultimately that's my goal, is to keep the discussions going, but to keep the profession continuing to develop the professional, to really develop, to promote and coordinate and support the professional. But more than that, to just bring us into a more of a desirable light in where we sit within organizations as well, which is, I think, very important. Just thank you again for the insights and thoughts that you brought to the conversation. For all those who are listening and watching, thank you for taking the time to be here and to watch this. If you found value here, please comment, like, share, direct message me if you have any comments, questions, or would like more information on anything that was expressed in this video, but also in the contribution to the profession. I'm Dan Scott, and I will talk to you next time.